And this is the first paper of this session. It's called Managing Academic Integrity in Online Assessment in the Post-Generative AI World. A mouthful. But we'll explain why all these important keywords should be there. And you will see what's the relevance during this presentation. So the team was Alan Tait, he's a God Fellow as well, sitting over there, and Michele Milner, she's a God Fellow, and Stephen Warburton, who is in Newcastle in Australia, and Cynthia Portalewski, who is a research student fellow, and she's in Buenos Aires. So an international team that had to deal with issues of different. Somebody try. I mean. It was not intentional to log you out. Okay, so Alan will start the presentation.
I'll stand on your side.
Yeah.
Could we have the next slide? So there are different sorts of journeys. There are some journeys where you know more or less where you're going to end up. And there are other journeys where you don't really know where you're going to end up. This is one of those journeys for us. Come on in. Because when we were trying to invent this project, it was our conviction that what we had understood hitherto was academic integrity, was profoundly challenged in today's world. So we didn't know any longer what academic really meant. It had been profoundly challenged initially, of course, in the COVID lockdown, which was a particular challenge for the University of London's worldwide students who've been examined in the same way, more or less, since 1858. We couldn't get together and examine all around the world. So that was a big panic here. But also, because of AI, what is your own authentic work? It's a question we didn't really know how to answer anymore. So that was really how we got into the topic. We've had literature search, which Michele is going to talk about. We also talked to some contemporary commercial solutions, people who are working on technology platforms, proctoring platforms, what they thought they were contributing to the situation. We also talked to program directors here and University of London professional staff on their take of the nature of the issues. So Andrew, give us the next slide. Thank you. Did we jump to 2 there? We did. Yeah. So why did the COVID-19 impact was a shock. We did find around the sector that there was great inflation. We did find academic offences went up very considerably. There was a lot of alarm in the management here. And while the last 2 years that has been controlled pretty successfully and is back to not quite in the same way to pre-COVID levels, it's under control. It's no longer a source of concern. It was certainly a sort of concern in the first year. Generative AI, of course, which we've been talking about for just over a year. At this time last year, I think there were still colleagues saying, stop students using it. That's the answer. Don't let students use it. That'll be the way forward. That quickly fell apart, and I think it should. Academic integrity, what does it mean? What does your own work mean? If you're using even standard word processing software on your PC, you're already being held by AI. So what did academic integrity mean? And how could it be sensible for the future to say to students, you mustn't use generative AI? If we did say, and knew that students were using it, that's one of the things we discovered. What does that mean about why don't I slip up with this phone? I'm just the door opens. Yeah, you can leave the door open.
Leave the door open, yeah.
That might work. Yeah. And lastly, we were aware that around the University of London, in all its complexity, as well as around the sector, there were all sorts of different solutions being invented and how we were going to go forward. Basically, let's go back to how things were. Let's get people back in examples, writing scripts, unseen scripts. That's the way to go forward in the company. A lot of people are saying, no, we can possibly go back to that. We don't like it, students don't like it. There must be different ways forward. But there's a whole range of them, and there's no establishment practice at all. Okay, can we manage the next slide? We were working with a core definition of academic integrity, which we think is critique by all this over discussion, which we think is built around honesty. We want students to have the conviction with honesty in assessment events, trust, a culture of trust with students, and students having a culture of trust with the institution. We think that is something that we should work towards. Fairness, people feel they've been treated fairly, so that they don't feel angry or disappointed. Respect, so that students respect their programs and their institution, and we respect students. So, for example, not going down the rabbit hole of assuming that all students are trying to cheat. It's our job to stop them doing it. But we actually respect students for legitimate participants in an educational process. Responsibility, getting students to understand what their responsibilities are, where the limits are to that. And lastly, courage. That, in our view, we have to have courage to go forward in different ways and not to just go back to how things were in the past. So that's their big critique. We might think that's inadequate, but that was the working framework we used. Andrew, can we move to the next one? Thank you. Michele, let me sit down and let me talk now.
Thank you. So building on that, then the themes for the literature review were really sort of that the meanings of academic integrity, because it's very easy to sort of think of it either around coursework and things that we're all familiar with around Turnitin and referencing, or to think of it around actually exams and different forms of cheating that may or may not take place in those. So it was really important then that we include everything and have a holistic meaning to consider. And with that, then the kinds of academic dishonesty that maybe are attached to those different sorts of assessment settings. Behaviors, of course, and how students behave, and again, thinking that across to the different settings. And really importantly, not just looking at this from a punitive basis to say, so, okay, this is the punishment and this is how it's going to be deterred, but thinking back, what do we really actually need to build that relationship of trust in terms of preventative measures. That, of course, gets you into the purpose and role of assessment. And again, I'll speak about that a lot later on and how that's very much related to building that trusting relationship. And of course, the regulations that we each have in our institutions and how those penalties are actually taken forward. And of course, for all of us, that the idea of proctoring came into really sharp focus in the pandemic as we had to work through off-site exams and then leading us now down the garden path, perhaps, or not, the inevitable garden path of ChatGPT and AI. Next slide, please. So if we come back to the idea around student behaviors, a way, again, to sort of break that down a little bit so you can think through the complexity of that, but the ones that relate to the individual factors of a particular student in a particular type of program, and then also the institutional factors and how those different educational settings may influence how the students behave. And really that, again, gets us thinking about how academic misconduct is managed then. Sometimes that's very reactive, depending on those contexts. But again, sort of pulling through that, and is it more of a deterrence punishment sort of approach, or is it more of a prevention approach and educating that? What's technology's role in that, and how effective is that, and how do people understand the effectiveness of technology is quite important. And that, of course, means that there needs to be a lot of training and education for both staff and students. How do we really sort of support our students to engage in this discussion, and at what stage do you bring it up? Do you bring it up right at the beginning when they're as part of their induction, or do you bring it up as just part of that planning for assessments. And of course, then the regulations and penalties and how this is revisited. I think certainly the speed at which all of these changes have happened mean that we need to have a good, clear understanding of how we revisit our policies so that they can be up to date. But again, the key message, I think, as Alan's already said, is creating a culture where we actually value honesty and integrity and how we support students to be able to think of that rather than just, oh, I better not do this, or oh, this is going to incur a certain punishment. I don't know why I'm handing back to
Get back to me. Right. Okay. So I need to say a couple of things about methodology. So we talked to 14 people. We interviewed them at length. There were, as Alan mentioned, program directors or they have a management position in the organizations we talked to. Two of them were directors of enterprises that were offering assessment platforms, and they had quite a lot to say about that. There were some people that had responsibilities around assessment in the institutions we talked to. So this is the range of people, the range of expertise we had in our interviews. So what I'm going to give you is a screenshot within the limited time we have of our findings. There is a report that is coming out soon, full report of the project. So please contact us if you would like to have, to receive the full report that will include the full literature review and also a full breakdown of the findings and our recommendations. Okay, so touching is going back to quite a lot of the issues that Alan and Michele talked about. We were interested in how, under the current climate, there was a change in perceptions of integrity under the recent developments, particularly COVID. And COVID, as you mentioned, was characterized by this abrupt, to start with, push into the online assessment and a change, a paradigm change for quite a lot of institutions, organizations. The other recent development is still recent, is still fresh, is still problematic in the sense that things are in transition, had to do with AI. So in this respect, there were changes in perceptions of integrity. And the reason for that was that pre-pandemic, pre-AI, the landscape in distance learning regarding assessment was pretty much unproblematic, or problematic, but as quite a lot of our interviews said, manageable. I will explain what I mean by that. In quite a lot of these institutions, there was an emphasis on the end-of-term assessment. This quite often was exams, where students had to travel and go to an exam center and take invigilated exams. Of course, this was changed altogether post-pandemic, due to the pandemic, and post-pandemic in quite a lot of these institutions. Online assessment came here to stay. So, in relation to that, there was a change in perception of how integrity can be managed in these environments. The other kind of recent development, and that's where things get quite complicated, it was AI. And I will explain further down what I mean by that, how the notion of academic integrity has been reconfigured under the developments in AI that are taking place as we speak in higher education. This focus on building a culture of trust with students, in a way, reconfirmed the findings of our literature review, where it was identified as a key way forward if we want to manage issues around academic integrity. So it came out of these interviews as well as how important it is to build a culture of trust with students. Our interest was to break down and go deeper to understand what this trust meant. And of course, it had to do with the definition of assessment of integrity that Alan referred to. But in our exploration, it comes out that this trust comes with awareness, familiarity, good knowledge of rules and regulations. Going deeper into what the limits are in terms of using other people's work. So it has to do with quite a lot of this awareness with all these issues that academic integrity bodies and committees deal with at the university, collusion and conduct cheating, but also it has to do with a different relationship with between students at the university in order to deal with issues of academic integrity. The third one was quite important as well. So it had to do with redesigning assessment. All our interviewees claimed that this is the way forward. This is the way that we can support academic integrity, not by just instituting some punitive measures there. We'll talk about what the technology does in some of this environment as well, how it can support academic integrity as well. But redesigning assessment was very important there. By redesigning assessment, I mean that quite a lot of the assessments that we're using pre-pandemic and pre-AI, generative AI technologies, has become problematic. I will mention a few examples. The proverbial academic essay the student writes is quite problematic because in the context of COVID, in the context of online learning, there are some risks of academic integrity when students interact, take an exam online, for instance, or submit a piece of work through an online environment. In terms of AI, it's become problematic because you can easily construct it, disseminate it, submit it based on the work that the student has done using an AI tool. Multiple choice quizzes is another type of assessment that it can become quite problematic. Exams as a notion, and I know that quite a lot of you, this is a standard thing with the audience of academics we speak to around our work around assessment, that have very strong views on the value or lack of value or lack of belief in what exams stand for. We are more kind of laid back, let me put it this way, about the notion of exams, in the sense that they're there, they're important for lots of organizations, they are important for quite a lot of professional bodies, which believe that exams should be there in order to approve or to look with a favorable view accreditations. So the idea there is how you can redesign exams in order to become a valid and robust, pedagogically acceptable solution for our students. And things have changed there as well in terms of redesigning assessment. So what we have is we have different type of questions, avoiding questions that can easily be regurgitated from a textbook, going into the notion and the field of open book exams, and quite a lot of the people we talked to were using this in their institutions. So it also has to do, exams have to do as well with discussing and not avoid the discussion around detecting technologies, proctoring and proctoring technologies, how this can work in combination with the redesign of assessment. So our interviewees, they were not negative 100% in relation to the use of proctoring technologies. However, they had some strong views about combining some of these proctoring technologies when necessary with redesign assessment to ensure that the student experience and the value of assessment is there for the students. Generative AI applications, yes, as I just mentioned, they have transfigured many aspects of learning and teaching, including assessment. They changed quite a lot about how we design assessment for our students, how our students potentially interact with a piece of assessment before submitting it. From our interviewees, there's a lot of uncertainty there. It's not uncertainty that derives from lack of knowledge, it's uncertainty that has to do with them feeling we're going through a transition period. And things are changing very, very fast, much faster than what we do at universities, which usually take a measured look at things, do some research, good research, robust research, publish, make sure that the information received from other people has been robust as well. So there is an issue there, and there is a problematic area that has to do with the use of generative AI technologies as far as assessment is concerned. The final thing I'm going to talk about has to do with policies and guidance. So from my interviewees, what comes across, there is very little evidence that student views have been collected in the recent period around integrity, or that students have been influential in how quite a lot of these university policies and assessment policies and integrity-related documents have been put together in the universities. One of the interviewees, only one, said that in the future, they were going to have an assessment review, and part of this assessment review would have to do with students being involved. The students would be involved in the assessment review of the institution in relation to integrity. Over to Alan.
Thanks, Mike. So we went back to the issue of academic offences, which there have been a rise and decline. We came up with these sorts of answers as to why students commit academic offences, so a complex field. Firstly, some assessment was so badly designed that it made it easy for students and tempting for students to commit academic offences, either wittingly or unwittingly. I have to say both happened. A lot of stress on students around the world in the University of London system whose knowledge of English was insufficient. So they weren't aware of the rules and regulations, they weren't aware of culture, and they weren't aware of how to fulfill the assessment demands. It affected younger rather than older students, we found. Students weren't clear about what expectations were made of them, so that's something that the institution has a responsibility for. And lastly, students talked about stress. The real world lives of students have a lot of stress in them, and they said they were tempted into assessment offences because of stress with time management, stress with parental expectations, stress with occupational outcomes, etc. Next slide, please. So, moving towards the sorts of solutions we think are going to be helpful, which these ideas aren't our ideas, these are ideas we got from program directors as well as from students. That we need to develop academic integrity activities to help students understand what it is. That's not a new idea, a lot of institutions already do that. We need to redesign assessment. So that's your summer written off. This is a big task, I think, which people are coming around to realising is going to have to happen in all programmes. We're going to have to rethink, redesign our assessment. The balance of assessment between continuous and final, the nature of the assessment, the skills and knowledge which we think we want to include in our learning outcomes, that's changing as well. So there's a big job to be done. We need to think about assessment strategies at programmatic level and not just module level. That needs to be revisited. Regulations aren't sufficiently clear at the moment, so the students don't know what the rules are, neither do academics and professional staff. We need to revisit which technologies we want to use, in particular, how far we want to go down the line of proctoring and so on, which some students had very negative views about in terms of intruding on their privacy. Others thought it was helpful in maintaining the reputation of their qualifications. We need to be clear about penalties and have a reasonable schedule of penalties which students can understand what they are. And lastly, we are going to have to revisit institutional policies and procedures. They're lagging well behind reality of what's going on in the world of assessment at the moment. So there's a whole range of assessment, the amount of work to be done by academics, our professional colleagues, and by students, in fact, is huge. I heard the man who invented Moodle arguing just recently that the AI revolution is going to be as big as the digital revolution was when it started 30 years ago. If you lived through the digital revolution in the university system as I have, that's very big. Next slide. So our priorities for future practical research, we think, are these three. How we develop ways to support teaching staff and students, that's a major priority. How we continue to assure the quality of standards and institutional reputation. If that goes badly wrong, it's really like being holed beneath the waterline for a boat. It's a really serious damage to a program or to an institution. So that has to be assured. And lastly, and this is in fact the content of our next project, which we just had agreed, how you integrate generative AI into learning, teaching, and assessment strategies. That is going to be another journey, but we don't know where we're going. And I think that concludes our presentation.